The man lay on the ground for 48 hours, but he didn't dare move his waist because behind him was a 100-meter-high cliff, and the slightest slip could shatter his bones. He dug at the earth with his fingers, but the sand was too soft. There was no grip. His whole body began sliding toward the cliff. His hands failed him. To stop himself, he had to press his face into the ground like a brake, and that finally halted his fall. But just then, his phone rang from inside his backpack. He didn't answer at first, because ignoring his wife's call could have consequences even worse than falling off the cliff. Yet even lifting his hand a little could send his body sliding again. So he changed position carefully. He kept his face pressed to the ground, shifted his hands, and managed to grab the phone. A second later, the man ended up stuck at the edge of the cliff. Below, the rocks were black and slick as honey. After 2 hours, the energy and exhaustion of 2 insects combined wouldn't have matched what he'd spent. He was drained. Suddenly, he started speaking aloud. It turned out he was calculating the rhythm of the ocean waves smashing against the rocks. If he could recharge himself with seawater, his life might be saved. But in a single second, the last of his strength gave out, and he lost consciousness. He fell successfully into the sea. The water was shallow, but his hips still struck the rocks. The brutal impact sent him into a coma. By sheer luck, he woke up in time. Summoning the very last of his strength, he swam out of the sea. But the real test had only just begun. After reaching the shore, he carefully inspected his body. The blood had clotted in the back, and it seemed there were no other major problems. But as soon as he stood up, he felt a faint crack inside. There were wounds on his head too, but they weren't serious. It was his waist that had taken the blow when he'd fallen in the water. His legs had gone numb. At that moment, he remembered he hadn't called his wife back. He quickly pulled the phone from his bag, but it had been thoroughly soaked. No matter how hard he pressed it, there was no response. Now it truly felt like the end. All he could do was shout for help, but who would ever come to a place where even birds don't land? Ahead stood a sheer cliff. Behind stretched an endless sea. There was no way out. He tore off the short sleeve of his shirt and dressed his wound directly. To save his strength, the man lay down on the rock and slowly drifted into sleep. When he opened his eyes again, he calmed himself. The pain in his waist reminded him he had to start surveying the surroundings. Climbing was impossible, but in the distance, he saw a small island. It was his one and only hope. He rolled himself with all his remaining power toward the sea and managed to slip into the water. But it wasn't as easy as he had imagined. With both legs useless and one arm badly injured, he could only crawl forward slowly with one arm. Not much time passed before his strength gave out. He was forced to rest right there in the ocean. Then a sharp pain struck his stomach, and he inhaled a huge gulp of water. As he slowly began sinking, staring death in the face, he thought of his wife again. He wasn't ready to die like this. The fierce desire to live burst something awake inside him. He raised one arm upward and finally broke back through the surface.